The beauty of a person lies not in his outward appearance, in the perfection of his form and complexion, refinement of manner or grace, the utterance of pleasant words, hollow and meaningless, but in its intrinsic worth, in the nobility of his character and the purity of his thoughts, devoid of selfish desires, jealousy and deceit, freedom from thirst and worldly attachment.
I did get to know Frieda when I was researching on what happened in Kashmir in 1947 and 1948. And I talked to a lot of people who lived through that troubled and turbulent time. And quite a few of them talked about this woman, this English woman, who was strikingly beautiful, with fair hair and blue-grey eyes, and who took the cause of Kashmiri nationalists at a time when that wasn't what everybody was doing, and at times wore a burqa to deliver messages to the underground. This is the underground that was opposing Kashmir's Maharaja. And then, at the end of 1947, enrolled in a left-wing women's militia in Kashmir and was willing to take up arms. She never had to fire a gun, but was willing to take up arms to protect Srinagar from invaders. I suspect, surely, Freda Bedi is the only nun who was once a member of an armed militia. She lived a remarkable life. She was born above the shop. Her father was a jeweller and watchmaker in inner city area of Derby in the English Midlands. It was very much against the grain that she got from Derby to Oxford University, and even more against the grain that once at Oxford she married a Punjabi fellow student. She said that she believed she was the first Oxford woman undergraduate to marry a fellow Indian student. She did so in spite of the disapproval of her family initially, the disapproval of her college, which disciplined her in what she regarded as a straightforward case of racial discrimination, and the disapproval of the registrar who married her and her husband in 1933, who, having married them, refused to shake their hands. I'm going to just read a little bit from my introduction. It was my destiny to go to India, Frieda declared. And from the moment of her marriage to BPL Bedi at a registry office in Oxford in the summer of 1933, she regarded herself as Indian and adopted Indian dress. She lived for 2/3 of her life in India, adopted its national cause and customs, and took an Indian passport. She served a prison sentence in Lahore as part of Gandhi's protests against an imperial power which happened to be her motherland. She was an English champion of Indian nationalism. Her spiritual journey was as profound and remarkable. She was church-going as a youngster, but by the time she enrolled at St Hugh's College, Oxford in 1929, she no longer regarded herself as a Christian and never returned to the faith she was born into. She encountered Buddhism in Burma in her early 40s, and a few years later her endeavours to help Tibetan refugees marked her most intense moment of illumination. The solace she found in Tibetan Buddhism emboldened her to enroll in the mid-1960s, when such adventures in Eastern religions were rare for Western women, as a novice nun. A few years later she took full ordination, the first Western woman to do so in Tibetan Buddhism, and quite possibly the first woman in the Tibetan tradition ever to receive this higher level of initiation. Frieda and Bedi's marriage was a heartwarming, insurgent romance, a defiance of convention, and an intellectual and political collaboration. The couple were, in Frieda's life-affirming words, two students in love, refusing to recognize the barriers of race and color, dissolving their religious differences into a belief in a common good, united in their love of justice and freedom, a marriage based on everything that was good in us.
I remember how I first met BPL, and when I arrived and realized I had to wait 15 minutes outside the door of the schools, I found there was an Indian student there reading the newspaper. And I thought to myself, well, I think I'd better say good morning to him or say something inconsequential, because after all, he'll think that I'm snubbing him because he's an Indian student, and I shouldn't do that. So I said good morning and made some remark about the day's news, and he said good morning and made some remark or said yes or no or something like that.
A wonderful thing happened after this book was published. Andrew came upon a letter that Freda had written to her brother-in-law who had objections to this marriage. So when Baba Bedi probably informed his family that I'm bringing this English mame in tow and I'm marrying her, he wrote a very stern letter, the older brother, who was an ICS officer.
He was ICS.
ICS officer. So he wrote a very stern letter and said, forget all that and just come back home, or finish your course and forget about women and forget about girls or whatever.
That's right.
So,
forget about all this girls
yeah,
and all, you were sent there to study and get back.
So Frieda wrote a wonderful letter which Andrew happened to get after the book was launched. Would you like to read that?
Just a week ago.
Just a week ago, wonderful.
It would have been even more wonderful if I'd got it before the book was
Maybe
published,
in the
but there you
second
go.
edition, the next edition.
So I came across this letter 3 days ago. I think it was written at the end of 1932 or early 1933, when Frieda was 21. And she's writing to her brother-in-law, who has clearly told her would-be husband to break it off now. And this is what she said. Dear brother, I believe you are a fair-minded man. Your letter, in spite of its disappointments, has not shattered this belief which Pyare Lal has given me in the first place. Because of this, I have a great trust that we shall in the end completely understand one another. I know how it must seem to you when your dearly loved brother makes a decision to marry someone who is a stranger to your land, to your family, and to your race. The very same thing has happened in my own family, when my dearly loved mother has had such a struggle. Many a time, although I never flinched in my decision, I cried myself to sleep at night, remembering just little before unnoticed kindnesses that mother had done to me. And I thought that the day might come when I should have to make a choice between her and all my home association and Pyare and a country which I loved but had never yet seen. God has spared me that heartbreaking choice, but had it come, it would have been for the man I love and India that I should have decided. I don't want to labor my sacrifice because I'm so rich in the love of Pyare Lal that all else seems insignificant. By love, I mean all the glory of the tender, strong, passionate, peaceful, contented, self-forgetful love of woman for man. I do not believe man was created to live without woman. As you love your brother, Baba Sahib, so I love your brother. But you are man, and I am woman. And while our love in its strength must be the same at the core, for me there is another complexion to it. I see in Pyare Lal the father of my children, and I tremble to the passion of tenderness when I think I shall one day suckle his son at my breast. None but the finest children could be born of the spirit which unites us and the strength of our bodies. I can never be an Indian woman and cannot give him pure new children. Would that alone prejudice you against them? Pyare and I are one country in spirit, and colour is unimportant beside that. I was not brought up in an easy school. I do not ask ease from the future. I want to serve, and to serve as best a woman can, by the side of her husband and children. I repeat, there is one thing I cannot do: become an actual Indian woman. And I know full well that some woman of his own race will miss a perfect husband in Pyare. But my spirit is with India and not with England, with Pyare and not with a man of my own country. My children will be an even greater bond, my clothes another. Would you deny me your perfect understanding for something I cannot help? It just happened that I was born in England. But it also happened that my soul is not in the country, but in another. I should be the last person to hold Pyare back from completing the promise of the struggle of his early life. I would rather cut my throat than demanize him. Your sister, Frieda.
quote Frieda. She said, "There are several things deeper than labels, color, and prejudice. Love is one of them," which is a wonderful quote, which is as profound as it gets. This one sentence alone, to my mind, puts Frieda on a pedestal much above the ordinary. Do you ascribe to that view, Andrew?
The thing that grabbed my attention most about Frieda, it wasn't the Buddhism, it wasn't the nun, becoming a nun. That's remarkable. It wasn't being jailed as an Indian nationalist, though that's also remarkable. It's the way in which she made that transition from being not simply an English girl, but a provincial English girl from a lower middle class family into an Indian woman who was confident, assertive, but touched her mother-in-law's feet and was determined to fit into a Punjabi extended family. And that, I thought, was quite something. She made a close friendship with Indira Gandhi, long before Indira was a politician. Indira spent a lot of time in the Kashmir Valley in the late 40s, early 1950s, and that's where Frieda got to know her. And that was quite an important friendship for her. Indira helped her at various stages. And then towards the end of Frieda's life, she got a message that Indira Gandhi was going to give her a special award as a foreign woman who had been of great service to India. And she was really upset about that. She had lived 2/3 of her life in India. She had an Indian passport. She had worked for the Indian government. She had fought for India's freedom from Britain, and yet she was still seen as a foreign woman. And I know Kabir tells a story, he had quickly to intercede to make sure that her mother didn't refuse the award and create a scene. And she did accept the award, but she was always seen inevitably, because of the colour of her skin, however she spoke, whatever language she spoke, and whatever she wore, as an outsider. But she was an outsider who did more than anybody I can think of to be Indian.
There is a very evocative chapter in that book, which is almost biblical. Frieda said that your people shall be my people, your country shall be my country. And, it is from the chapter on Ruth, from the Bible. But she stopped short of saying, your God will be my God. That's what Ruth says in the Bible, but Frieda stopped short at your country shall be my country. So I do not know if she ever converted to Hinduism, but I do know that she was a seeker. So she went through phases of Hinduism and Islam, and then finally she found her oeuvre in Buddhism. So Ranga, would you like to?
Yes. Well, either before marrying my father or after marrying my father or coming out to India, she never converted. She was far too liberal a thinker, and so was my father. And the question of religion coming into it just did not arise. So she did not convert at any stage. However, in 1947, early 48, we had moved from Pakistan to Kashmir. And during the 47 period, she was away in England because she had no idea what happened during the riots and everything else. Now, we went to Kashmir and she went headlong into the refugee camps, which was formed when the raiders were coming into Kashmir, and they had raped, they had looted, they had killed, amazing things. His book, Mission Kashmir, my God, you've got to read that to see exactly what happened in Kashmir at that time. Now, because of her Western sensibilities, she got to a stage that she was virtually near a nervous breakdown. She couldn't take all this misery and to see what was happening. And at that time, I think to counteract that, she decided that she must practice some faith. So obviously, she was a seeker all the time, but never got the opportunity to do that. So she followed the Hindu faith for 1 year, observing everything. She read the Gita, she learned the mantras.
And Karwa Chauth, you said. Yes.
Karwa Chauth, anything to do with Hinduism. She wanted to then she finished that year, and then she practiced Islam. Now, for Islam, she ran into a bit of a problem, so there was about a break of 6 months because you could not find a Quran in English. There was no Quran in English. Eventually, my father managed to find one, which was published in 1922, which I still have, with an endorsement from my father to her, wishing her the best of luck. And she practiced the Muslim faith for 1 year, complete, with the rosas, 5 times a day praying, and everything that Muslim religion requires. And it was sort of a coincidence that just as this was ending, she got a UN assignment to Burma. And she left on this 6 months UN assignment to go to Burma. And when she went to Burma, there was Buddhism. And all I can say is she fell into Buddhism's lap. Simple. And she was a Buddhist there, but not as a nun, just became a Buddhist.
As a biographer, to try and put together her life, understand all the different chapters and episodes of her life. And I hope I have done justice to her. She does, I think, deserve remembering, as I say, as much for the way in which she lived her life than for offices that she held or institutions that she created, but the way in which she crossed over what are now often frosted boundaries of race, religion, nation, and gender. She was a pioneering feminist journalist. She had a column called From a Woman's Window in the Tribune in Lahore in the 1940s. That's really, in a sense, I think it really is quite remarkable, and I think it does speak to us today.
The Lives of Freda is a result of Andrew Whitehead's commitment to her story, his passion for his work, and his unrelenting enthusiasm to delve into her life and our family. I believe there are no coincidences in life, and that he was chosen by my grandmother to write her story. When you read the book, you quickly see that writing Freda Bedi's story was no easy feat. She was so many things: a prodigy of a daughter, an Oxford scholar, an inspiring feminist, a devoted wife, a rebel to the British, a freedom fighter to Gandhi. She was a rehabilitator, a teacher, a sister, a mother, a grandmother, and the most highly ordained nun of the Tibetan order. My family is grateful to Andrew for this work, and we thank him from the bottom of our hearts.